Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to today's tropical weather outlook for August 21st, 2026. Today, we're going to look at a few new sneaky disturbances which have formed in the subtropics in the Atlantic, and we are tracking right now, and both of them have some chance of potentially developing into a few new quick name storms in the Atlantic. And of course, I will update you on the Pacific as we are tracking tropical depression to sea and its potential impacts to Hawaii. So definitely lots to talk about today. Let's get started though by taking a look at the Atlantic, because interestingly enough today, two new areas have showed up on the tropical weather bulletin, both of them in the subtropics here, and quite the typical scene that you would expect for an El Nino year. Two disturbances from non-tropical origin that the National Hurricane Center is tracking right now, and I'll show you what the models show here, but I think both of these areas might have a shot at becoming quick spin-ups in the Atlantic and snagging a name very quickly before we have to watch for whatever might develop here in the MDR next week. And this is a very typical scene of El Nino, because usually as the deep tropics is shut down with lots of wind shear and dry air, that's especially when sometimes the subtropics comes to shine, and we get these non-tropical origin storms from fronts, broken down fronts or lows that occlude and transition into subtropical systems, like this disturbance here in the far northeastern Atlantic might especially do so, and they sometimes help pad the named storm count in a hurricane season. And we've seen this happen before, especially in years like 2018, where we had, quite a few of these quick spin-up storms. And yes, though they will be quick, probably not going to add too much to the ACE points, but still, regardless, they will be of interest to ships out there. They will bring impacts to, shipping, because again, we have trade, which happens, especially through the continents. So it's not like, names are going to be going to waste here. And I'm saying that because immediately I know, especially when it comes to these, random disturbances that we sometimes get in the middle of the Atlantic, there are a lot of people online who like to say that the National Hurricane Center is sometimes just naming stuff for the sake of, adding extra names to be crossed off the list. But no, these are genuine areas that we will be watching. Both of them have a low chance right now, but these quick spin-up systems tend to kind of, ramp up really quickly. And I'll show you why I do believe in just a little bit, using the models and also taking a look at sea surface temperatures, why I wouldn't be surprised if we get something out of both of these areas. The Eastern Pacific, though, continues to ramp up quite significantly with lots of activity right now. We have our two current active systems, Hurricane Lala, which is holding strong as a decent hurricane, 100 miles an hour right now, so Category 2 intensity, although it's probably going to, not last much longer, but did intensify and try to rebound for a little bit of time here. But either way, this is going to be adding ACE points to the total ACE of the Eastern Pacific, and won't be much of a threat to land beyond that. But we have 2C here, though, on the other hand, which still could pose some threats to Hawaii, but this storm is trending much weaker. Environmental conditions are not really favorable for it in terms of shear and dry air, but this will still bring rainfall very likely to Hawaii. And the last thing those in the Hawaiian Islands need, especially after Lala last weekend, is more rain. So I'll be talking about that later on as well. And then we have two other disturbances here in the Eastern Pacific. Both are probably going to form. One of them is Invest 91E right now, at an 80% chance of development, and we have another one as well, west of, or east of Invest 91E, and that's at a 50% chance, and this probably also has a decent shot of developing. And then something else being highlighted beyond it. So the Eastern Pacific here, once again, continuing to be very active and probably going to become, will continue to be a named storm producer machine for at least the next few weeks. All right, moving on to the Atlantic now. I want to show you what's happening here. And you can see our two distinct disturbances in the subtropics right now. The first one here, just to the southeast of Bermuda, definitely producing some decent convection today. And again, I believe it came from the remnants of a front, which, draped across the western Atlantic here eastward, and, some remnant energy was left behind. And that's, again, the kind of formations that we see, especially in a year like this year, where the subtropics are more favorable oftentimes than the deep tropics for development. And sea surface temperatures, too, are definitely warm enough in this area for something to happen. But then you also see this other disturbance here in the northeastern Atlantic, which is kind of developing this comma shape to it, and that's a sign of a low pressure which is beginning to occlude, and from that, sometimes these low pressures try to transition into subtropical storms, and that's potentially what might try to happen here with this northeastern disturbance, this northeastern interesting little low pressure, as this actually heads towards Europe this weekend. So that'll definitely be an interesting storm for them to track. And of course, I'll go over why I think we might actually see some subtropical development in a little bit. And then elsewhere across the Atlantic, you could obviously see our tropical wave train holding steady. But none of the waves are expected to develop right now, at least, for the next few days. But again, still watching for the potential of a tropical wave, which will move off the coast of Africa next week and potentially develop. So, we're starting to get our hands full here in the Atlantic, tropical development-wise. And taking a look at the vorticity map, I just want to, highlight a little bit more the two areas here that we are watching. Definitely decent vorticity on this first area in the far northeastern Atlantic, literally to the northeast of the Azores. So that's how you know how far northeast it is. And then decent vorticity as well on the second, low pressure area. But I'm pretty sure, especially with this one, we're probably going to see more consolidation here over the next few days, as of course, we watch and see whether or not this is able to quickly spin up. So with that being said, let's move on to what the models show for this afternoon here, and I'm using the 12Z GFS. First of all, the first feature you could see here in the northeastern Atlantic, that first disturbance, and you could see what happens. The low pressure system that we have right now, starts off as this, broad, definitely non-tropical system, but it eventually occludes and it sheds its front here. As you can see here, it definitely detaches from whatever front it might be associated with right now, and then it kind of broadens out, but it tries to become more circular. And this is definitely a classic look to me of a storm that tries to transition into a subtropical disturbance here, and it's definitely going to try, as I'll show you a little bit more here in just a little bit, and then that takes a slight dip to the south, and then eventually moves to the northeast and potentially heads on off towards Europe and might bring impacts to them. And then you could also see here in the northwestern Atlantic, the piece of energy that we have right now, according, associated with our second disturbance here, not really too much of a very strong signal, but there's definitely some vorticity here that tries to consolidate. And just knowing how these quick spin-ups work, especially in the northwestern Atlantic here, and we saw this with crystal ball too. The models, really didn't start to show any sort of circulation trying to develop, especially with these very small, quick spin-ups here in the subtropics, usually until sometimes just a day or so before they actually are able to form. And especially with the amount of decent vorticity here that shows up, wouldn't be surprised again if this is something that does try to consolidate, and eventually this will move on off to the northeast too, and maybe head towards Canada. But again, probably not going to be too much of a significant system beyond that. But those are two main areas that we have to watch here over the next few days in the Atlantic. And again, I mean, both of these storms are not going to be too consequential in terms of impacts, and very likely, there's still a chance that neither of these areas develop. And I mean, they will be, clutch storms after all. I mean, that's what these spin-ups really are. They are clutch storms that kind of, come in a clutch and spin up at the last minute and add extra storms, to the Atlantic. So that's what's going to happen, and maybe they will intensify some, but I don't think they're going to be of too much significance, and too much, to worry about impact-wise, except maybe for Europe, but just in general because they might have a pretty decent weather system going towards them as we go into next week. And then, of course, maybe if something does actually try to spin up here going into northeastern Canada, you guys will obviously have to watch for that as well. But then you can see the main event of what we're really watching here, and that is next week, as the models are still showing this aggressive tropical wave. Looks like it already moves off the coast of Africa now by Monday, and then it quickly traverses west across the Atlantic, and it looks like the GFS here showing development starting about 5 days out. And I'm actually surprised the National Hurricane Center has not mentioned an area here for potential development just yet, because all of the models do show development coming out of the MDR here. So we will see whether or not the NHC actually latches onto it soon. I'm pretty sure they will, though. And already by this time next week, 7 days out, the GFS here shows a pretty solid system in the MDR. And even taking a look at other models too, like the Euro AI, they have something that's still developed here in the MDR. And that definitely blows up, especially once it gets towards the subtropics. Again, the subtropics really looks like it's going to be the area that kind of saves the Atlantic activity-wise this year. But again, there is a solid signal here in the MDR, and we will be watching it and seeing whether or not it develops. But I'm pretty sure the National Hurricane Center will mention it in a little bit. Sea surface temperature-wise, though, across the Atlantic right now, I do want to show you, especially here near Bermuda with this other disturbance, more further closer to Bermuda here. Sea surface temperatures in that area are generally very warm. So whatever does develop here probably will be a tropical storm. And especially taking a look at the next few days here, this will have definitely quite warm sea surface temperatures to work with. So this will definitely have convection that'll probably blow up. Especially near Bermuda here, very warm sea surface temperatures, as warm as 28, 29, and again, even stretching pretty decently far north up to 27, 26 degrees Celsius. Water temperatures, definitely more than enough for, a quick spin up of some sort that'll, try to jump scare you at the last second to be able to occur. So again, wouldn't be surprised if one of these disturbances here in the subtropics over the next few days quickly snags a name for the Atlantic. But also here in the northeastern Atlantic, you may say, well, why do you think subtropical development might be possible, even though sea surface temperatures here are very, very cold? Well, that's kind of the process. That's related really to the process of subtropical development. Subtropical storms in general, we call them subtropical storms because they're a mix of hybrid extratropical systems and tropical systems, meaning, they come from non-tropical origins. They get their energy and, their fuel kind of from the atmosphere and from the jet, and, from baroclinic forcing, as we like to say when we refer to extratropical or non-tropical, atmospheric forcing, versus tropical systems, which obviously draw most of their fuel and energy from warm ocean temperatures. So that's why subtropical storms are called what they are. So they're able to develop over cooler sea surface temperatures like we have here in the northeastern Atlantic, where they're only 21, 22 degrees Celsius. But sea surface temperatures that cool, especially when it comes to these subtropical setups, are still warm enough for, at least in the very least, getting tropical development or subtropical development. Probably not anything becoming tropical, but again, it probably will help in terms of subtropical development. And taking a look at a tweet here as well, and I think Adler, very, very well-informed and knowledgeable guy on Twitter who I follow, and he also follows me back. That's very nice. He mentions it very well, probably better than I can explain it. But he says a very interesting genesis possibility will exist up near Portugal, exclamation point, because it is a very unusual, but not, uncommon occurrence, these subtropical systems. And especially when it comes to subtropical development, we tend to get them in very obscure places anyways. And he mentions next week as a non-tropical low attempts to transition into a brief warm core system, deep convection occurring over marginal SSTs. Again, as I just mentioned, 21, 22 degrees Celsius, that's definitely not very warm, would redistribute the PV and the building ridging aloft, decreasing local deep layer shear, enough for a system to sufficiently organize, and this pathway bears some resemblance to subtropical storm Alpha, which of course happened in the infamous year of 2020. And I do remember Alpha very well, and that was also yet another storm that, again, was able to transition from, an extratropical low, which occluded and became a subtropical storm, which went directly into Portugal. And I'm not saying that this will happen similarly to Alpha, but it is an example of a storm that did exist and did something similar to what might occur here over the next few days with this disturbance in the northeastern Atlantic. So we will see what happens. But I honestly would not be surprised if we do get something to develop out of it. And again, especially given the year that we are tracking this year with El Nino, wouldn't surprise me in the very bit. All right, moving on to the Pacific now, and especially, Tropical Depression 2C here, which I have up on screen right now. Definitely not looking like a very organized system today, as you could see, barely blowing up some deep convective bursts here and there. And this system really did become a victim of the environment. Thankfully, as you can see here, kind of strong wind shear and dry air in its vicinity. So more than likely, this is not going to be a very strong storm, but the National Hurricane Center is still expecting that this will move on off to the west-northwest, probably strengthen into a tropical storm, but luckily, more than likely, stay to the south of Hawaii track-wise. But again, as I have to mention here, just because the track and the cone of uncertainty, is not indicating a storm going directly over you, that does not mean that you could still get some impacts. And Hawaii very likely is still going to experience some rainfall from the moisture of 2C here as it passes to the south, and probably Moke, the next named storm on the list here for Hawaii and the Central Pacific, as this passes this weekend. And in fact, here's the rainfall forecast from the National Hurricane Center. Definitely some hefty rainfall totals once again, especially for the Big Island of Hawaii. Right now that they're forecasting up to 12 inches of rain, so up to a foot of rain, with isolated areas up to 15 inches. And this is very significant because, as I said before, Hawaii definitely does not need any more rainfall, especially after dealing with a brutal pummeling of rainfall from Lala last weekend. We're probably also still going to see some gusty winds as well, brought with whatever shower and storms from the moisture of 2C here occurs to Hawaii. So we're still going to see impacts regardless. So you cannot count this storm out completely, and we're still going to have to keep an eye out on it. And just showing you the GFS here over the next few days. It obviously will remain a weak storm here. Again, its environment is not going to be very favorable. And this will probably briefly become a tropical storm, but then move on off to the west-northwest, and then eventually, as things just become less favorable for it, it's going to die out. And probably another good way to show you the not very favorable environment, here's a look at the moisture and precip. And I mean, there's definitely a lot of dry air in its vicinity. And you could see it as well when I showed you the satellite image earlier, not really producing a lot of deep convection, but still, when it comes to moisture, indicated by the green here, that represents ample moisture and, humid relative humidity values. You could still see a decent amount of moisture is brought to Hawaii. So with that, again, rainfall, and of course the National Hurricane Center is expecting a lot of rain. So be aware of that. plan and prepare for that. Get sandbags ready and whatnot, and just don't let yourself be caught off guard by the rain, as I keep on having to say over and over and over again. And especially, for those that are just dealing with and coming off the heels of the effects of Lala, now is especially not a time to be complacent about any potential impacts that we will get from Lala, even though this will probably remain weak and stay well to the south track-wise and getting direct impacts. But again, indirect impacts with the rainfall still very likely here over the next few days. So we will definitely be keeping an eye out on that. But I do want to show you as well what else is going to happen tropics-wise here in the Pacific, because a lot is going to happen. First off, we have something that'll develop here, probably Invest 91E gets going and actually becomes a pretty decent system here that probably, let's take a look at the intensity on this, 982, actually it gets as low as 971, so maybe this might potentially be yet another major hurricane brewing in the Eastern Pacific here, and again, that's Invest 91E, but that should move on off to the west-northwest, or it'll move on off to the northeast, northwest, and then move on off eventually to the west-northwest. But is this a storm that might actually? Yes, this actually is it. There has been some modeling that long range, one of these storms, would develop and move and track off to the west-northwest, and the GFS here in the long range, once we get towards around 10 days out, you guys definitely have another storm here that gets close to Hawaii. So don't let yourself get caught off guard by that too. And especially now that the Eastern Pacific is going to start getting very active here. I mean, we have one storm that gets going, that moves on off to the west-northwest. And I mean, it probably will be a dying storm by the time it gets to Hawaii, but still, something else tries to develop, and then here you have yet another thing that begins to develop roughly 7 or so days out, very far to the east, and maybe that'll become another long-tracked hurricane as well in the Pacific. Lots of activity here to track in the Eastern Pacific over the next few days, so don't let yourself get caught off guard, especially if you are in Hawaii, as I expect this barrage of storms to probably continue, and probably beyond, the depression here to see. Where I wouldn't be surprised if we still have at least 1 or 2 more threats down the horizon for Hawaii left before the end of the season, and including Mexico too. We'll have to watch, especially once we get towards later in the season and we start seeing storms that recurve more to the northeast, straight into the mainland of Mexico. So yeah, things are going to be very interesting for the next few weeks in the Eastern Pacific for sure. And then of course we will be watching and seeing how the Atlantic produces activity, as well as we have our 2 interesting, sneaky little disturbances to watch, and of course some more, which might potentially come out of the deep tropics next week. So our hands are definitely full, tropical tracking-wise for sure, over the next few weeks. And once again, as I say every single video, you will want to keep it tuned here, as we will be going over it on a daily basis and updating you every single day on model changes and expectation changes and everything you need to know on the tropics, and as I always promise. So make sure to stay tuned, and if you want to do that, again, as I always say every single video, subscribe to the channel, and also share this video, share this channel as well for any other people out there who might be interested in tropical tracking content, as again, we will be keeping you posted every single day. But that's going to do it for today's discussion. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, as I always say, like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, and share with family and friends as well. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all, and I'll be back with more tomorrow. See you then.